Welcome to Back to the Father, a show about the journey of life focused on our final end, which is God Himself, our loving Father. And now, here's your host, Dave Palmer.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Back to the Father here on the Guadalupe Radio Network social media platforms. This is a program where we talk specifically about topics related to the Summa Theologica, and we're glad you're with us. We're kind of like the friend that just kind of pops in every now and then, not entirely predictable. This show is in theory every week, but Fridays are tough, and Fridays often tend to be the day where we have a lot going on. Or next Friday, for example, I'm going to be taking the day off to go up to Kansas to be with my daughter for her family weekend, and so we won't have a show that week. But, every now and then we pop in. But one way that you can be sure to know about this program is to be on our email list, because I do generally send out an email a few hours at least before the program and let you know that hey, guess what? There's going to be a show today. Sissel Anderson is on the other side of the glass there. She's running the board, and she has been part of this show from the very beginning, and appreciate her. I like to kind of bounce things off of her. And so let's see, as far as things going on within the GRN, we had a show the other day about, by the way, Sissel, how are you? Nice to see you.
I am doing well. It's great to see you too.
I saw you waving. I was like,
I just was like, I turned the camera on so I could wave, so people are not like, who is Sissel? What is she doing? Does she exist actually? Is Dave just talking to himself?
Yeah.
All the things.
I like, it's just, this camera I like, we've got this cool camera set up, and that interview I did with Mike Short the other day?
Yeah.
Because he was sitting right here and I was sitting there, and I guess the camera, because I kept looking over at him, I made a mistake. I should have been looking straight ahead, because the whole shot was like the side of my head, because I was always looking over at him. But I like this camera shot. Hopefully you do as well. And if you are out there in social media land and you're watching this program, let us know who you are and where you're watching, whether you're in the U.S., what state, maybe we've had international people that have watched before as well. And we're glad you're here. And sometimes we go an hour. I'm just guessing, just my gut feeling this time is might be about 30, 45 minutes for the show today, as long as it takes to get through the material. But by all means, if you have a comment, like our dear friend Joel, who says it's his favorite show. I think Joel is the only person in the world this is their favorite show. I don't know. I kind of like it personally.
I was going to say, Dave, if you don't even say it's your favorite show, that's like really bad. Like, we have to.
I know. I don't know. It's well, I like it a lot. Let's just say I like the subject matter, right? I'm not going to commit like Joel commits. All right, so the one we're going to talk about today, and I love how you put this on the bottom here as far as the tag. And in Sissel's defense, typically I send her a tag and say, hey, here will be the title of the show. I didn't send her this one, but I kind of like what you did. You said Summa Theologica equals the priesthood.
Question mark. Very particular.
Which and so what is your thought behind that? Because it's like, is the Summa the priesthood or?
I was just thinking now. Granted, I'm trying to think if there's a better way I could have done that. I did come up with it very last minute, but I was like, the idea is that because your description is talking about how does the Summa relate to the priesthood, and so I thought, well, okay, does the Summa then equate more priests or like that kind of thing like that?
Okay,
that was my very shortened version of that thought.
No, I like it. I mean, it caught my attention. I bet we're going to get more views on this show just because of that tagline, which means I should give up doing taglines and just let Sissel do it. But the reason, and so as Sissel said, what I want to talk about today is the connection between the Summa Theologia and vocations to the priesthood. And what spurred this on is that I was asked a couple of months ago to speak this morning on September 19th to a local Serra group, the Serra group that meets at the University of Dallas. And so as I was thinking about, what am I going to talk about? Obviously, their whole purpose is to foster vocations. And I have great respect for the group. There are several chapters in Dallas, and I think a couple of chapters in the Fort Worth Diocese as well. And they do a number of things. They meet, they help funds, and they support, I think, financially, seminarians and that kind of thing. So it's a really great group, and I was delighted to be able to talk to them. But what I said to them was, the Serra Group has really helped me in my vocation as a husband and father, also my vocation as, the executive director of the Catholic radio station, and then also my vocation inside of the vocation, which is my teaching and studying of St. Thomas Aquinas and the Summa Theologica. And I don't know, I probably have told you this before, Cecil, but back in the late 90s, and I was living in Mississippi, and kind of a dead-end job. I was 31 years old. I was still single, and I was just a little restless. And my mom said, "Hey, why don't you move back to Dallas?" And, they got some great things going on. They got these groups of young people that are meeting. And so I did move back. And the group that I got involved in back then was called the Young Sirens. And I don't think the Young Sirens still exist. But back then, man, it was hopping. I mean, it's kind of probably, kind of like the groups that you're in right now, and I was a little bit older than you are now. Cecil's still in her 20s. So it was the Sirens that made such a big difference for me, because I was not in a very good place spiritually. But once I got into that group and met some really good people that were pursuing holiness, and also the Eucharist, when I was able on Wednesday nights to go over to St. Monica Parish and, sit before Jesus in the Eucharist, even if my reason for going there wasn't really for Jesus, it was more like I want to go out and have a drink afterwards, and maybe I'll make some friends, maybe meet some girls, or, that kind of thing. But I'll tell you, if you just sit with Jesus, it's going to make a difference. And so I started off my talk this morning just thanking them for the impact, because, as I mentioned, that group formed me. And being in adoration really made a big difference. And so when it was time for me to meet my future wife online, I don't think she would have, had given me the time of day if she had met me 3 years before or 2 years before. But I had been formed so well that I was, I think, a more eligible person for, marrying a good Catholic woman, right? And so I just got a text from her, in fact.
What timing?
Yeah, right. See, the text was, Patrick and I are going to take a nap, so don't call me. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to.
That's love.
Yeah, that's love. So, all right. So the Sirens helped me in that regard. I think it helped me with my personal vocation, certainly helped me in my professional vocation, because once I got in front of Jesus in the Eucharist, once I was able to make some new friends, learn about my faith, get excited about my faith. And boy, I'll tell you, it was, I just could not get enough. And I just wanted to learn and study and just find out every single thing the Catholic Church has to offer. And I eventually got into Catholic radio. And so again, I trace that back to the influence of the Sirens. And I remember one day picking up Humana Vitae and reading that encyclical by Pope Paul VI, and it had such a big impact on me. So I don't know if, Cecil, you have these kind of like watershed moments in your faith, if there were things like that, or going into a group, or reading a certain document. Is there anything like that? I mean, I know you're a convert, so it's a very different story for you, but anything like that? I mean, for me, getting involved in the Sirens and really doing adoration for the first time, and meeting people that took the faith seriously, that were young and fun and didn't mind going and have a beer afterwards. That was a game changer for me.
Yeah, I think for me, I converted when I was 17, but there was still obviously, I don't know, I feel like we're always constantly like converting, continuing to grow in our faith and deepening. And honestly, it was when I was almost done with college, and I didn't really have a college group actually while I was in college. I was on my own with that. But I started helping with a teen discipleship group. And it was really through that I kind of was introduced to the concept of what a prayer life should look like. Because I think it was one of those things where I was like, I don't know, when people said that, do you pray every day? Do you have a prayer life? I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Because it just, so many people are talking about like, oh, the Lord spoke to me. And I just didn't. I was like, okay, how how does that
Yeah.
happen? I was like, is everyone just like kind of group lying almost, and so that was probably one of the things that really changed, was being taught and like getting mentored, and also like helping mentor other people into that. So that was probably the moment, and reading like St. Francis de Sales Introduction to the Devout Life.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you remember when I brought the guy named Brian Davidson around one time? He used to be one of our
Yes,
ambassadors.
I believe so. Yes.
And I remember Brian was one of those guys that I met, and he had gone to the University of Colorado, and he ended up in Dallas. And, he was the guy that I drove over after adoration one time to go to a bar, and he was just a very normal guy. He wasn't like a holier than thou, and he had his faults, jelly like me and all that. But on the way over, he was talking about saints and, who's your favorite saint? And I was just like, really? We can have these kind of conversations, like on the way to have a drink, and we just adore Jesus, and it was so wild for me to encounter that. And again, that's I'm going into a lot more detail now than I did this morning in my talk, but that's why I really appreciated the Serrans, because that group is exactly what I needed in the summer of 1998, 27 years ago, when I was really coming in to my faith. And so what I primarily want to talk about on this program is more focused, and we got Steffi.
Yes, Steffi said hi.
I don't see her comment.
Yes, I think it's on the portrait
Okay.
YouTube stream. Yeah, these days we're all fancy and we stream on YouTube twice basically.
I see.
And so Steffi is there. So hello, Steffi. It's good to have you with us, and everyone else who's joining us across all of our other platforms. Feel free to drop us a hello. Say where you're watching from, and if this is your first time watching or anything like that, just let us know you are here. And if you have any questions, or if you have your own testimony too, I'm sure everyone has had those moments where they're suddenly getting deeper into their faith and getting excited about it. So.
Remember we used to take phone calls?
That was way back in the day.
A long time ago.
You're always welcome to give us a phone call.
Somebody wants to call in. Put a text. It'd be kind of cool to. I think we could put you on. Okay, so the whole topic of this show really is about the connection between the Summa Theologia and priestly vocations, and this is what I was trying to get across with the Serra group that I spoke to this morning. And a lot of it has to do with going into the history and the story of St. Thomas Aquinas. And I was very surprised, and this is not any kind of criticism of this group, but I was surprised almost in a pleasant way when I asked this group, and it was probably about 15 people or so. Most of them are older. I'd say, mostly in their 60s, 70s, maybe even a couple of them in their 80s. At this meeting today, I asked them if they were familiar with the story of St. Thomas Aquinas at the end of his life when he stopped writing the Summa. And I don't know that anybody in that group raised their hand and said they would. Now, this story because you've heard it a whole bunch of times. And again, I thought it was kind of cool because I was like, oh, well, good. I'm glad I get to tell you this story and you haven't heard it before. And so I will ask the people who are watching out there in social media land right now if you have heard it, and let me know if you haven't heard about this, because I find it pretty fascinating, and it connects to this whole topic. It connects to priestly vocations. I promise you I'll bring this around, okay? So at the end of his life, and I find this the most bewildering thing, and it was at the end of his life, but he didn't know it was the end of his life. St. Thomas Aquinas is 49 years old, and I think even back then that wasn't, terribly old. He wasn't like, dying of old age or anything. So, significantly younger than I am right now. And he has already spent 10 years writing his Summa Theologia, which was his magnum opus. It really was, I think, what he had been building up to his entire life, writing a lot of commentaries on Scripture, commentaries on Aristotle's works, and just a whole lot of writing. And then finally he decides to write this magnum opus, and he stops. He just stops writing. And the reason he did was because he was celebrating Mass one morning, and he had a mystical experience with Jesus. And Jesus said, "Thomas, you have written well of me. What would you like as your reward?" And Thomas said, "Nothing but thee, my Lord." And from that moment, he told his scribe Reginald that he could not write any more of the Summa. And he said it was like straw. And I remember when I was reading through the Summa and I came across that part where he stopped writing, I was offended because this had meant so much to me, and everything that I'd read was so significant and so life-changing to me, and all of a sudden he's calling it straw. But it highlights the fact that compared to what he had witnessed in that mystical experience, everything here below was like straw. And he could not get himself to write. So then he, 3 months later, I think unrelated to that decision, he died coming back from a council. And then his scribe Reginald finished the Summa, going back to Thomas's old writings. And so keep that in mind, the fact that you've got this mystical experience that St. Thomas Aquinas has. And then on the one hand, this experience, and then you have this just amazing body of work which he had done, which continues after 750 years to be the gold standard, really, of Catholic teaching. I mean, how many times does Dr. David Anders or Jimmy Akin or Carlo Broussard or Cy Kellett or you name the person, Jeanette Williams, quote the Summa? I mean, this is 750 years after Thomas called it straw, and we're still quoting it as the gold standard. Okay, so keep that in mind, that interesting kind of juxtaposition between something that we continue to cherish, almost 800 years after it was written, and the very author of it, after he had a mystical experience, is calling it straw. Okay, so that's the first thing to keep in your mind. Okay, there's an interesting little juxtaposition there. And now you go to the beginning of the Summa as he begins to write it, and we've talked about this before. And he, in the very first article of 3,000 articles, he makes this distinction between what he called philosophy and sacred doctrine. Philosophy is the things that we can know through the light of human reason. And sacred doctrine are those things that God has to reveal to us that go beyond the possibility of us knowing it. Okay, so sacred doctrine would be teachings on the Trinity or transubstantiation or the Assumption of Mary or the bodily resurrection. Things that we're taught, but we could not have figured it out on our own. Whereas philosophy are things that we could figure out, like math and chemistry and physics and botany and those kind of things. So at the very beginning, he's making this distinction. He's saying there are certain things that we can, through the light of our human reason, come to know. Things that we can experience in the world with our senses and our various faculties, like our intellect and will. But then there's something beyond. Okay, and so you see kind of where I'm getting at is that's what he had. The window was opened at the end of his life into that beyond, and he was never the same again. Now, we haven't experienced that, and I think if we had, I don't know that we could do what we're doing right now. I don't know if talking on this show would just seem so like, I've seen the other side, I've seen Jesus, and I don't want to talk about this stuff anymore, right? So that's what Thomas experienced. And then as you go through the Summa, and I promise you I'm getting to the priesthood, okay? I promise you, okay? We're getting there, okay? Hang tight.
Everyone's going to be like false advertising.
As you go through the Summa, you have all these different teachings. Like, for example, you have the teaching on the virtues. Well, some virtues are for the here below, okay? The moral virtues, temperance, chastity, humility, right? These even prudence are for our life here below. Okay, so that's our experience here. Some virtues are for the realm of beyond us. Okay, the theological virtues, the object is God. They're infused. They're revealed to us, by God, faith, hope, and charity. You get into something like the law. You've got law like natural law. That's imprinted in us. We know this naturally, that there are some things that we should do and we shouldn't do. Human law, right, is laws that we construct. And then there's divine law. It's a law that points us to something beyond us. And so again, with all these teachings, the gifts of the Holy Spirit are supernatural. These are not things that we can earn. They're given to us as gifts, and they allow us to be amenable to the Holy Spirit, God himself, helping us in our walk. And so we're on this journey, and it's like divided between two different realms. Okay, up here, what Thomas saw, what's heaven, what's our goal, and then all these things that we're doing here down below. And so deep into the Summa, we've got the incarnation. And all of a sudden, you have entered into the world God himself. And so that split between the two, what Aquinas saw, what sacred doctrine reveals, what is related to the gifts of the Holy Spirit and the theological virtues, that realm, I guess you could say, and then what's here below, it was united in a single human person, right? So this human, the way I shouldn't say he's a human person, he's a divine person. And this divine person walked the earth with a human nature, a divine nature, and so that like split was for those 33 years of his life, it didn't exist in him. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's like, I don't know.
Absolutely it is, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Okay, so we had Jesus. We had heaven and earth united in a person, right? Walking around, doing miracles and that, but that was a very, very brief period of history, right? And then at the Last Supper, Jesus, knowing that he's going to die, he leaves the Eucharist with us. All right. And what else did he do at the Last Supper? It was Holy Thursday. He institutes the priesthood at the same time, right? He institutes the priesthood. He gives us the Eucharist all on that same Holy Thursday. And then within a day of that, he was going to be dead, right? So no longer did we have any kind of like person walking among us uniting these two areas, the supernatural and the natural, right? But we've got the priests, all right? And the only way we're going to have the priests and the only way we're going to have the Eucharist is if we have the priests. And so that's why in this short way that I've kind of been explaining, the Summa is really about us coming to grips with the fact that we are hybrids, we are living in a natural world, but we are aspiring to get to something beyond, and even within ourselves, we are natural and spiritual. We are, we have spiritual souls. We're really, really fascinating creatures, all right? But we can't get there on our own. We have to have the help of God, and we have to have the grace of God. We have to have the supernatural gifts, the theological virtues, all these things that he provides us for us. And the priest is the closest thing that we have to Jesus. Okay, that's why they say in persona Christi, right? So we have like little Jesuses walking around as the priests, and their role is to be that mediator like Christ was between the supernatural and the natural. And so as you go through the Summa, you're going to see in every single stage what St. Thomas Aquinas is doing is he's trying to make that distinction, saying that we have the natural world, we have the supernatural world, we're down here, we're aspiring to go there, and God is trying to draw us back to himself. That's why this show is called Back to the Father, right? So I've talked a long time. I hope some of that made sense. And so are there any comments out there?
Yeah,
anybody saying anything?
Yes, we have a few people to say hi to really quickly. We have Sean on Twitch. He says hi. He's a frequent watcher of our GRN shows on Twitch. We also have, oh goodness, I've lost her, Eliza on Instagram, who said hi. And I asked if she'd ever heard of the story of St. Thomas Aquinas when he stopped writing the Summa.
Is that Eliza from the Medjugorje trip?
I don't think so. I don't think
you
so.
remember Eliza,
Yeah,
right?
I remember Eliza. Yeah, no, I don't think so.
That's not a real common name.
No, it's not, but I don't believe so. If it is, let us know, Eliza. And then and she said no, but she has now that you have told it. And then also, we just had a new comment from someone on YouTube, Vazel. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, on YouTube. So thank you all so much for joining.
Actually getting more comments today than we normally do.
Yeah, I got a lot of people saying hi, so we appreciate that. If you have any questions or you're just like, I didn't understand what Dave was just talking about, let us know. We'd be happy to follow up.
So we've got 2 different YouTube channels, or how
Yeah,
many?
we have one YouTube channel, but the way it works with the algorithm is we have one stream that is very good for if you're watching on your computer, on your desktop, and one stream that is in portrait mode that is good to watch on your phone.
Oh, okay.
So that's why there's 2 kind of like ways that people are commenting.
Oh, I see. And it's so funny when we were doing that cruise program on Wednesday morning, Joe was running the board, and he made the comment about Sean, because Sean was on the air, and he said, "Sean, are you on Twitch?" And Sean's like, "I never even heard of Twitch," but it was that same Sean. Does this guy spell his name the same way as
Yes,
Sean?
he does.
Shaun. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right, and the reason why this excites me so much is that I mentioned that when I first picked up the Summa and I started reading it, it really hit me in a very, very good way. And that's why I was so shocked to find out that Aquinas stopped writing it. I mean, can you imagine like reading your favorite book and you're really getting into it and it's getting really suspenseful and you're walking your way through it and the author just quits? You'd be like, come on, man. And so, but it makes such perfect sense. In fact, I'm happy that he stopped writing it, because it shows that as much as we may love the teachings and we might still be benefiting from them 750 years after they're written, it's still straw, And I even made the comment this morning, and I think it's certainly true. I said, what we broadcast on the radio through the Guadalupe Radio Network is straw by Thomas's, definition, but it's all we have to work with right now. We put it out there, but straw is actually a compliment, because if the beauty of what we say on Catholic radio and the things that we talk about is straw, imagine how amazingly sublime the supernatural is going to be. And so I think the key to the Summa and the key to getting a lot out of it, and the thing that I really realize more and more all the time, is that you have to read the Summa understanding that as interesting as it is and as glorious as the natural world is, it pales in comparison to what God has in store for us. Because, G.K. Chesterton said about St. Thomas Aquinas in his book, The Dumb Ox, he said, to him, meaning Aquinas, even the momentary was momentous. To him, even the momentary was momentous. And what does he mean by that? Is that I think that St. Thomas Aquinas lived a life of awe and of wonder. And I think that when he saw a sunset, or when he saw, a bumblebee or a butterfly, or most importantly, the human person or the Eucharist, I think it excited him a lot, because it was beautiful and it was a sign, it was an effect of God, and it made him very excited, right? But you can only imagine that he went through this life for 49 years excited about the natural world and how it really was an effect of God and how it pointed to something, a great cause. And then when that veil was opened up that one day at Mass and he experienced the living God, it was so much more than what he had experienced. And that is to kind of tie in, as we kind of, wrap up here, people over the last couple of weeks, there's been these, tragic things like the Charlie Kirk shooting and assassination, and this, this poor girl out in Charlotte arena that really has disturbed me so much. And rightly so, and the shooting in Minneapolis. And it just seems like day by day there's more things to get distraught about. But if you keep this in mind, and that's where the straw comment comes in, is that if you realize everything down here below is really just straw, and St. Thomas Aquinas was willing to give up his life work and give up everything that he had been doing because he had a glimpse in that life afterwards, it really puts everything else in perspective. It just says, you know what? We can get through this. We can get through this because what awaits us is so glorious and so amazing, so much so that one of the greatest minds who ever lived put down his pen, and even though he wasn't dying, even though he wasn't sick, he said, I can't do it any longer. To me, that's more beautiful than him finishing the Summa. To me, that brings more hope. And thanks be to God, when I get to heaven, I want to thank two people. I want to thank Aquinas. Well, I want to thank Jesus first. Okay, first Jesus, the Blessed Mother, and then Aquinas, and then Reginald. I want to give Reginald his scribe, man, a big old high five in heaven.
Honestly, he needs some. We need to make sure people put some respect on his name.
Yeah, they should canonize that guy.
Honestly, yeah, the scribe of St. Thomas Aquinas.
He finished the Summa. Come on.
Yeah, St. Thomas would not have been able to do that without him. I do have a question from Kat on YouTube. She said, for someone new to the Summa, what book recommendations would you make? Because I just want to put it out there, Dave does not generally recommend everyone just pick up the Summa and start reading it straight through, unlike what he did.
And Kat, great question. And I will say, like Sissy was saying, I know a couple of people brighter than me and smarter than me that went and got the Summa, and it was kind of like, this just didn't hit me, So I don't know if the Summa in and of itself is going to hit you, but I wouldn't recommend you go out and spend $180 and get the Summa. It's a 5-volume set, but you might go online and read a couple of articles and just see if you like the style. But to answer your question more directly, Kat, I would, like right now, go online and get a book by G.K. Chesterton called The Dumb Ox. All right, this is a short book. It's about, if it's 200 pages, I'd be surprised. And G.K. Chesterton is such a great writer, and it's generally thought to be the best book about St. Thomas Aquinas. And you will get a taste of his life, some anecdotes in a very Chestertonian manner. You understand the basic, thinking. And Chesterton was a big fan of St. Thomas Aquinas. He loved him. Remember, I just quoted him a moment ago about, for him, even the momentary was momentous. I would read that, and then I would, my second recommendation would be, I wrote a book, but my book is called St. Thomas Aquinas for Everyone, and it's geared, and Kat, I don't know how old you are, if you have kids, but my book is geared towards parents who want to teach their young children, 5, 6, 7 years old, basic principles of the Summa Theologica. It's only the first part of it, prima pars, but you'll learn about God and his attributes and the angels and human nature and that kind of stuff. So you might want to get that one, St. Thomas Aquinas for Everyone. It's got a long subtitle that I don't remember. And let's see, what else? Dr. Peter Kraft, can't go wrong with him. He's written about 100 books. He loves St. Thomas Aquinas. He has a book called The Summa of the Summa, where he puts an actual part of the Summa, and then he has a bunch of footnotes, and he explains it. And so that's a pretty good one as well. And then there are some more heady type of writers about the Summa, Jacques Maritain, and a guy named Gilson, Gilson. I can't even pronounce his name. He's French, but those guys are more kind of brainy. That if you really are getting into it and you want to get more of an academic type of approach to it, you can do that. All right. So, but that's my recommendation. And Kat, if you do get Chesterton's The Dumb Ox, let me know what you think, because I've read that a couple of times and I really enjoyed it very much. So any other comments?
Jose on Facebook just said amen. And then Kat says, thank you for those recommendations. And I believe that's everything that we've got right now. If anyone else has anything else, I did put in the chat box on YouTube the Dumb Ox recommendation that you had by G.K. Chesterton. But I'll try to split that into the other chats as well if you wanted to. I know, Dave, you mentioned several other books, but I thought that was kind of like the first and foremost one.
They can only read one at a time.
I mean, I don't know. I read like 5 books at once. But
interesting little point, Sissel, I don't know if you know about this, but over at University of Dallas, I don't know how much time you've spent on the campus over there, but they have a little kind of lower level eatery called the Rathskeller.
Yes.
And they call it the Rat. Mm-hmm. Well, they've renamed it. Well, okay. I don't know if they've renamed it. They've double named it. And so, and it was so funny because, and I'd heard about this, but they now are calling it the Dumb Ox. And so after my talk today, there was a gentleman, I don't want to say his name, but it was funny because he said, "Do you have a few minutes?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "I want to take you across campus and show you something." So he brings me across campus, and I kind of knew what he was getting at, because I had heard that they were, renaming or double naming this thing. And he said, "That's the Rathskeller. Okay, this is where people go and they have a drink or a bite to eat or something." And then there was this other sign, and it said the Dumb Ox. And he said, "What do you think about that?" And he said, "Doesn't it sound kind of pejorative? Doesn't it sound kind of like the dumb ox?" And I said, "You realize this is the nickname of St. Thomas Aquinas, right? This is the book that G.K. Chesterton wrote about." And this guy didn't like it. He thought that I wasn't going to like it either. And I said, "I love it."
Because it makes people go and look up St. Thomas Aquinas.
Right. I mean, and he was aware of that, because this is the nickname that Aquinas' fellow students at the University of Paris gave him. They thought he was stupid, and which of course he wasn't. And St. Albert the Great said, "Yeah, you call him the dumb ox, but the bellow of this ox is going to be heard for centuries to come." And Albert was right. His bellow has been heard. Was there something else, Sissel? You look like...
No, I was just checking on something, but nope, I think that was everything. If anyone has any final comments, go ahead and speak now or forever hold your Reese's Pieces.
Or come back in 6 weeks when we have our next show.
Are we going to be on next week?
No, I'm not in.
That's right, we're not going to be on next week.
I'm going up to Benedictine.
This is your chance. We'll be back again probably the week after that.
But, I will say, and thank you, everybody, for commenting and being here. This show is rather unpredictable, but it seems like of late we've had more people commenting when we do come on. And I do recommend, if you want to get an email list, just email backtothefather@grnonline.com, and you'll get a little notice, anywhere from 3 hours to, if I'm really on top of it, a day before the show, to let you know what we're going to talk about on any particular program. And then you can be reminded also to tune in and watch it. But yeah, just email me backtothefather@grnonline.com. Do you get that also, Sissel? It goes to you too?
Yes, I get that one as well.
Okay. And, in weeks to come, we can talk more about this kind of thing. But I think that, what's on my mind about the Summa is not just kind of going through it, one by one, but also just showing how an understanding of the Summa can help us live differently, see the world differently. And that's kind of what's happening with me, is that the more I read, the more it's enhancing the way I see the world, the way I respond to things, the way I look at nature, especially the human person. You'll never see the human person again. I don't know. You'll respect the human person, and that's why some of the tragedies we see against human life in our culture, it's just no Thomist could ever do these things, because it's beyond me that how anybody could ever be cruel to a human person, because we're just so amazing among all the creatures of the world. All right, that is going to do it. I did promise you that we would get out in about 30 to 45 minutes, and I'm not going to make a liar of myself. And Sissel, thank you very much for your help. Thanks to Kat and Joel. Hopefully I didn't do anything to make this no longer Joel's favorite show. And by the way, it's now my favorite show. I thought I kind of like this one. I think, yeah. It used to be Young and Present. But
man, I got demoted.
Yeah, Young and Present got demoted to my second favorite show. That's Sissel's
okay.
show. Do you have a show coming up next week?
No, my show was supposed to be last week, but it was Share-a-thon. So my show will be coming up, in fact, in October.
All right.
Stand by.
And that's the second Friday of the month, 11 o'clock Central Time, and you can pick that up as well. All right, that's going to do it, and we now are going to play the little closer and keep an eye on the dog, okay, on this closer. It's kind of an interesting thing. But anyways, thank you so much. Hope to see you in 2 weeks for the next Back to the Father, where we continue to study the Summa Theologica and have a nice discussion about it. God bless you. Have a nice weekend.
Thanks for joining us for Back to the Father. And don't forget, the glory of God is the human person fully alive. If you have comments about the show, email Dave Palmer at